So what's the task that OCR have set us? Well, it starts off by asking us to remind ourselves of Act 2, Scene 1 in the text, and to compare it to one or more performances. And we're going to use the Polanski film that you've been watching. So you'll eventually be comparing this scene to the film. What are the three things that we've got to look at? Well, Banquo's thoughts and feelings, that's easy. How other characters react to him, that's also very easy. But then this is going to get you the higher grades, the A and the A star. Why is Banquo such an important character? And to think about that, we have to think, well, why is he an important character to Shakespeare in the play? Why is he dramatically important? But also, why is he politically important to King James, the king on the throne when Shakespeare is writing? And Shakespeare is writing for King James and looking for his patronage, looking to be approved of by him and to make his way in society because of his association with the king. And finally, we have to look at this scene and compare it to what Banquo is like elsewhere. So quite a lot of ground to cover, even though we're going to focus today on just a very short scene. And finally, if you want to secure the A grade, we're going to consider the director, Roman Polanski, whose wife was murdered savagely in a very bloody attack in August of 1969. And Polanski immediately stopped filming the film that he was already making, spent about 6 months doing nothing, grieving about his wife's death, and then in 1970 decided to make Macbeth, notoriously Shakespeare's most bloody and savage play. And that would influence how Banquo is portrayed, and indeed Macbeth. So that's a little of the background, and now on to Banquo. So the first thing we have to consider is this scene is set at night time. So here I am, out at night, searching the night sky, and as I pan across, it's pitch black, you can see barely anything. And Banquo talks about there being husbandry in heaven. There's no stars, there's no light, and this echoes Macbeth's words, "Stars, hide your fires, let not night see my deep and dark desires." We've got this image of heaven being kept in the dark. It can't see the evil that is about to befall Duncan. God can't stop what's going to happen. And so as a film director, nighttime is quite tricky. You can easily film darkness and make things quite sinister. But for Shakespeare, things were much more difficult. As I disappear into darkness, you'll see that Shakespeare couldn't do that. His plays are performed in broad daylight, and darkness can only be recreated by characters carrying torches and constantly referring to the night. And so that's a prime difference that Polanski can exploit in his film, and does. So our scene starts at night, and this is signalled by Fleance carrying a torch. Remember, there's daylight because it's an open-air theatre, and there's this immediate reference to night, so the audience knows where they are physically, but also night is a symbol. It's a symbol of evil, and this is picked up immediately by the fact that the time is just gone 12, midnight, the witching hour. And so Shakespeare is careful to craft this scene at a supernatural time, a time of evil. And of course this is just before Duncan is going to be murdered by Macbeth. Fleance is obviously quite a young boy, perhaps 10 or 11. His age isn't really specified. And Banquo's language is really curious here. He says, "How goes the night, boy?" Very unaffectionate, and obviously Fleance has been left on his own while Banquo has been in the banquet with King Duncan and all the other nobles, and with Macbeth, and he's only now just come out. We might expect him to be much more affectionate with his son, and also we might ask, well, why isn't he? And the other thing you'll notice here is my insertion of the word my. How goes the night, my boy, would be much more affectionate. But no, instead, Banquo focuses on the fact that Fleance isn't his boy, but is boy. In other words, he is the son. And that reminds us of the prophecy of the witches, and he's thinking of his son's role in that prophecy. His son is going to become king. And perhaps there's an element of resentment here. Perhaps he's jealous of his own son for what's been promised him by the witches. He might not even consciously be jealous, it's just revealed in his choice of language. Banquo is perhaps also thinking about the witches. Fleance points out that it's a sinister scene, he can't see the moon is down. But Banquo immediately characterises the moon as female, and she goes down at 12. And this gives us a clue that perhaps he has in mind the witches' prophecies, and also unconsciously he might even have sensed Lady Macbeth's evil. She is the person who's going to put down the guards by drugging their drink and give the signal to Macbeth that Duncan is ready to be killed. And then the strange formality of this relationship between Fleance and his father, Banquo, is revealed by his having to call his father Sir, as though respect demands a complete lack of affection. And it's a very odd relationship which will make us question exactly why Banquo wants to save his son from murder. We get a sense of Banquo hiding away from his feelings, perhaps, feelings which might leak out in other ways. If we return to that line, and she goes down at 12, that she could even be a subconscious reference to the absent mother. It seems that there is no wife to Banquo, there is no mother to Fleance. Banquo is a father bringing up a son on his own, without the moon to his own son. And Shakespeare would expect his audience to pick up on this strange mood between father and son, this sense that something isn't quite right, through his use of iambic pentameter. And Shakespeare's characters nearly always speak in iambic pentameter, definitely if they're of noble birth. And for this stage of our lesson, iambic pentameter involves 10-syllable lines. But look what happens here. The first line from Banquo is only half 10 syllables, it's 5 syllables long. And typically what Shakespeare does is give the next speaker another 5-syllable line to suggest completeness. But that doesn't happen here. Fleance replies with a 10-syllable line, as though he is completely unaware that something is wrong, but Banquo, his language, keeps reminding us, and she goes down at 12, that is then 6 syllables long. And then Fleance picks up on this. You would expect him to reply in 4 syllables to complete a 10-syllable line, but no, he echoes his father, replying in another 6 syllables. And then as Banquo speaks to his son in this passage here, we'll see that his lines keep failing to meet the 10 syllables, 11, 10, 11, 11, 11, and 7. And this is a clear signal to an audience in Shakespeare's day who are attuned to this sort of rhythm, as you're attuned to music. They would be completely aware that these lines are too long. Something is amiss. And obviously that something is Macbeth's plan to kill Duncan. It's going to upset the natural order. But more than this, it also suggests that there might be something wrong in the relationship between Banquo and his son. And partly the reason for this might be revealed in his first instructions here. First we'll notice that he uses imperative verbs, instructions to his son. Hold, take my sword. And then we realise that he's passing something on symbolically here. The sword is symbolic of self-defence and attack, and he's characterising Fleance as a warrior. He's telling Fleance, look, that is your role in life, to be a warrior. And perhaps at this stage Banquo is thinking Fleance is going to have to defend himself against Macbeth at some stage in later life, because Macbeth knows that he is going to become king. But there's also a more sinister possibility that he thinks Fleance will grow to become a warrior and take his kingship by force. And then finally in this little bit you'll notice the word my, the word that was missing when he was talking about his boy. He didn't call Fleance my boy, but the sword is my. And so we realise that Banquo identifies himself as a warrior, This is the most important part of his personality, and that's the gift he passes on to his son. And of course, to be a warrior, you have to divorce yourself from emotion, and so he keeps his emotions hidden from his son, even though he may feel them. Then we get the alliteration of husbandry in heaven to emphasise what's going on in Banquo's thoughts. Well, he's fixated on heaven because Shakespeare uses Banquo to expose the evil that Macbeth is about to do. Heaven is supposed to protect Duncan because he believed in the divine right of kings, and that means God put the king on the throne, and to go against the king's choice is to go against God's choice. And then this interesting word, husbandry. And this in Shakespeare's time meant being careful, particularly with money. And it suggests that he's being very careful with his son's life. But also later in the play, we'll see that he's very careful with the knowledge that the witches has given him. He never exposes Macbeth as the likely murderer of Duncan. And one of the reasons for that might be that it brings his own son's ascension to kingship much closer. Shakespeare also uses Banquo to foreshadow death. So the stars are not visible, but he presents this in a metaphor. Their candles are all out, as though heaven is not wasting light, not wasting burning wax. But this also reminds us of the death of Lady Macbeth, when Macbeth will reply, "Out, out, brief candle," where he uses the candle as another metaphor for life, and the snuffing out of the candle as a metaphor for death, and in this case the death of Lady Macbeth. But here Shakespeare is perhaps suggesting death is immediately linked with Banquo, as though he's foreshadowing Banquo's assassination. This hint is then picked up in the next line, where a heavy summons, which is like a command, lies like lead upon me. And we've got this idea of heaviness, again reminding us of death. And the assonance of the EA in heavy is echoed with the EA of lead, and of course that itself rhymes with dead. Shakespeare's leading us through sound slowly toward this idea that not just Duncan is going to be killed, but so is Banquo. And Banquo is perhaps fearing for his son. So you'll remember symbolically he gave his son the sword to defend himself, but also if there were an attack now, symbolically, Fleance would be defending Banquo. In other words, Fleance is going to become the king that Banquo isn't. Fleance is going to become the person that Banquo can't be. And here he expresses his worry, saying, "I would not sleep." He daren't go to sleep, he needs to be on watch to protect his son. So perhaps his love is revealed that way. And of course, "I would not sleep" is also a metaphor for death. He's saying, I'm not really ready to die. He doesn't want to. And that makes his death a bit more tragic for us when it comes. He knows it's coming, at least at an unconscious level, and he's still fighting against it. And interestingly, Macbeth will echo this language later once he's killed Duncan. Lady Macbeth says to him, "You lack the season of all nature, sleep." So Shakespeare uses Banquo ironically. He's the antithesis, the opposite to Macbeth, and yet they're remarkably similar. And this is an ambiguity that he uses at this stage.